work hard on accessibility here. I was really pleased to say that when I came here, I was sort of grabbed partly for that, so it was kind of pushing it around the door, but even then, with a lot of wanting to do it, it's taken us probably 18 months to get where we wanted to be. Fair comment? Yeah. We've kind of been plateaued about 12 months, and then we just had a real big hit on it about 3 or 4 months ago. So that's been good, but it's a job you've got to keep working at. But before I sort of leap in, what sort of split have we got? Devs, content?
Mostly devs.
Yeah. Any other content people here other than Paul then?
This is me, I'm the
Okay.
sorry about that.
Right. One thing I do want to say is don't let the content people fool you. It's not a dev's job to be accessible. It's not a content person's job to be accessible, it's the team. Because you can't do it, without each other. So as a dev, you might make it impossible for the content people to write accessible content, but equally you can give the content people all the tools you've got and all the opportunities, and if they don't use them, you can still make a complete hash of it. So it's a teamwork effort. So it's definitely not the webmaster's job either, because they're just at the bottom of the cliff crying. So what have we got? So he said I've got about 40 minutes, so if I go over, just stop me. I can talk about this all day, every day, and it's a bit of a high-speed romp through it, because...
I've got my international symbol before we move on. Ready?
Yeah, okay, so, come on. That's not looking good. Right. So, yeah, Internet's for all. So, web standards. I think this was a pretty key statement. So, the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disabilities, is an essential aspect. Does anyone know who actually said that? No one ever does, it's okay. That guy doesn't know. Yeah, then clearly it's designed in, baked in from the beginning, so we ought to be able to cope with accessibility. And I've got my little comment on that later. So, quickly, what sort of impairments are we talking about here? So, the sensory impairments are deaf, hard of hearing, blindness. So, one or multiple of your senses are not working the same as the norm. Sorry about that. So, the physical impairment, which might be sort of neurological. So, think about MS. If you're trying to hit that tiny little target with your mouse, but you can't hold your hand still, that comes in there. So, you may be paralysed in one arm, or you may not actually have that arm, so you can't use a mouse because you haven't got any arms to use them. Or you might just have fallen over and broken something. Come on. So cognitive, so you need to think about dyslexia or intellectual impairments, all that sort of thing. Or everybody, really, because we all get old and we sort of sit on the spectrum of those as we get older. Or, as I say, if you fall off your bike, like I did, it can knock you back for a while. So, but universal design encompasses usability as well. Yeah, we all get worried. So, what sort of accessible technologies are there out there? Well, first of all, you can just use the computer you've got. You don't need anything to add on to it. But blind people often use a screen reader. Has anyone seen a screen reader? Or is a bit aware of them? If there's time, I haven't got a demo here. Magnifiers as well, so whilst you can magnify the screen by zooming your browser, some people have to go that step further and actually use a magnifying tool, which ends up basically you're looking at the window, you're sort of looking at that square there and moving it around. And that's kind of an interesting way to be. And often they combine that with a colour change. So if you're having trouble seeing white and black because there's too much light coming from the screen, you can maybe change everything to yellow text on black background, which ruins your beautiful designers. So remember, it's about getting the information across, not how beautiful your design looks. They might use alternate keyboards, so if you've only got one arm, you can use a one-handed keyboard, or you might use an alternate pointing device. So if you can't use a mouse, you might use a head wand, you might use a sip and puff device, which is pretty extreme, but basically you have a tube in your mouth and you sip and puff on it to tab around a page. So when we talk about later about how you get around a page and how you get around some barriers. If your mega menu, you have to tab through it every time and there's 200 items on it, it's kind of pretty frustrating and you've probably hyperventilated at that point. And there's alternate formats, so they're not sort of accessible tech as such, but you might want to get your content over in Braille or large print, or think about using plain language. And you should always think about plain language or appropriate language, and maybe translations, because the other thing that's always worth mentioning is not everybody speaks English as a first language. So, and especially in New Zealand, we've got 3 official languages. So, out of the box, CWP and SilverStripe are, it's moved on a bit since those days, but certainly when I first did the CWP assessment, at the time I was employed by the Blind Foundation, and SilverStripe asked me in to have a look at the CWP product out of the box, no customisations, and we went through it, and pretty much if you take that basic flavour and put decent content into it, it doesn't prevent you making an accessible solution. So that's the good news. Of course, we're going to customise it, aren't we? So don't break it when you add your content. So if the tool allows you to put different heading levels, don't use bold and underline instead of using a heading level. If the tool gives you the clues that you need to put alt text on a picture, follow the hint. And don't break it when you customise. So when you write that little module to do that clever bit, be thinking about, okay, how am I going to keep ensuring accessibility is in there still? And that's my version of Tim Berners' Lee. It's not quite so good. But it's really easy to make it accessible, so why do we keep having to try and break it? So the standards are based on 4, sorry, is everyone aware of the W3C guidelines? And if you're not, I can bore for Britain on it, so feel free to call me anytime. There's a set of guidelines, they're internationally recognised. New Zealand's adopted them as part of the government web standard. In Europe, they're an ISO standard now. Basically, they said, pay us hundreds of dollars and we'll put a front cover on the standard you can get for nothing elsewhere. So, four main points though. Perceivable, so can you perceive that there's something on that web page that you need to read, act upon, what have you. Can you operate it? If you perceived it, but can you operate it? So it's no good being able to perceive there's a video player there if you can't operate it because you don't have a mouse. Yeah? Is it understandable? So do you know why you want to operate it? Is it clear to you that if I press this button, what's going to happen when I click the button that I've perceived and I know how to operate? Do I understand what's going to happen? So that's things like not randomly opening in a new window, or not having video that starts playing without you asking it to. And robust is, I think they just put that in to make up the acronym because it works nicely as poor. That's really running against a code checker. So does your HTML meet the standards? Have you got lots of random unclosed brackets in there? Or yep. This is one I throw together because you can never trust the web. So you either find a perfect example of something bad and you go, right, I'm just going to show you it, and someone's actually fixed it, or the web just doesn't work on a talk. So you imagine you're a sighted person, you're fully norm, and you get this form. It's called Application for Important Services.pdf. I should change that actually to 12377ZZZ, because often things are labelled like that, aren't they? Some random name that you thought made sense in your filing system, and it just says yes, no, MF, unlabelled edit, and then there's an unlabelled button. This is why it's really important to start thinking about accessibility when you're putting together those customised bits, the forms, because you can perceive there's something there, you might even be able to operate it, but you'll never understand it. And it's probably not robust because it's probably not following HTML because you haven't got a label for those fields. So if you saw that, that's much better. So the questions are in there, and they're actually attached to the checkboxes there. You know, that field there has got a label, and that label is explicitly tied to that field. There's things like ARIA that you can use, but HTML does all this pretty well, and the button's labelled submit, so now you know what you're doing. Making sense, guys? Yep. So think about contrast. I often say the visual area is one that gets forgotten because people think about blind people with screen readers, or someone who's deaf maybe. They don't think low vision is probably the biggest one, especially as we all get older, and especially as you get those designers who think grey on grey is really cool. So if you can crack the visual side, you've probably cracked keyboard access at that point, and also it's helping the rest of us to actually read what you're writing. And again, remembering from the purpose of what you built, you're trying to get some information across to people, not make them go, this is too hard, and go elsewhere. So you can see that contrast is really, really too little. And it starts to get better, but it's still not there. And there's a tool you can use, there's quite a few tools, but basically there's an algorithm that says what's the difference in contrast between the foreground and the background. And it's really simple, it's a go, no go. Yeah, that's cool. There are some caveats on that as always. So yeah, that's actually slightly better. See the difference? And that's still the same font and size, but you've got a decent contrast. Too small. Way too small. All that 10-point stuff that you put at the bottom of the forms, I struggle to read it. So again, much easier because you make it bigger. And then think about your fonts as well. You really want to read a densely packed page of whatever font that is, or Comic Sans, or you really, really don't. This slide goes back to my Blind Foundation days where we all stuck with a minimum of 12-point sans serif, just Arial, because that works on most places. But if you specify sans serif, that's better for most people. And again, all the research says that dyslexia and low vision, sans serif is better. I could point to 3 people who used to swear at me and say, no, I want ×0 because that works for me. So remembering this is you're looking at the average, but if you get the contrast up and a nice sans serif clear font at a decent size, you're going to hit the majority of people, and even those that don't like it can either change it themselves or will live with it. And don't forget, don't put lots of stuff in caps. You can use caps a little bit, but they're harder to read, especially for dyslexics. The thing I haven't put on this slide as well is to think about your white space. So leave room around the words so that they can show their shape. Yeah, as I said, some people, a lot of low vision people, yellow on black is the best because it doesn't work so well on paper, but a screen is a light emitting device. So if you've got a white background, you're pushing a whole lot of light to someone who's maybe photophobic and is having trouble with the light, and they can't see the little black letters. Whereas if you swap that around, the light is coming out of the letters that you want them to read, and the black is an absence of light being transmitted at them. So that works a lot better. So it's a technical reason for everything. This is really a sort of content side of things again, but what we say from a dev point of view is don't stop your designers being able to do this. So, shut up. You shouldn't just use colour or sound or shape alone to convey a meaning. So you need to have options. If I can't see the different colours, then how do I distinguish between them? So if I just, if I said, this guy here, in the list, all the people in red failed and all the people in green passed. That's great until you're watching it in black and white where you've done a colour change and you've got actually yellow on black. But you can still use the colours in a way that gives a difference. So actually having the word fail, you can still have the word fail in red so everyone can see that. But you've got a distinguishing thing that doesn't rely on the shape or the colour. Again, transcripts for video content, audio content. Think about that a little bit though, because sometimes a transcript isn't enough. So if you did is anyone not familiar with Psycho the movie? So there's a scene in Psycho where someone gets stabbed in a shower. It's quite a cool scene, lots of dramatic music. It's 5 minutes from the last piece of spoken dialogue all the way through the murder until the next word is spoken. So if you just had a transcript of that, you'd have no idea what had happened if you couldn't see the pictures. You might probably make a pretty good guess. There's some good screams in it. In a longer session, I like to play that. It's quite good with the screen off. And suddenly people go, I get what the point of audio description is, to tell you that there's a shadow appeared in the shower. The fact that she's in the shower, not outside in the rain, that there's a shadow appeared behind the curtain. You hear it, you see a knife, that sort of thing. So thinking about how your information is presented is not just in one form. It's not just as written's not too bad because you can get that in sound, you can convert that. But if you put a video up, think about subtitles, think about transcripts, think about audio description. Same with images, think about alt text. And again, it's a content thing, so Emma, sort it out.
Sorry.
With your alt text, picture of a dog isn't actually that useful if the picture is actually telling you something else. So it might just be a picture of a dog, but it might be a picture of that particular dog wearing that special collar. And that's the important thing that the picture's trying to tell you. I did a job for, I still have nightmares about it, a ladies' health organisation. And I learned things that I should never learn. But one of the things they had on the sidebar, they had a group of women just telling their story. And they'd obviously very clearly and carefully chosen those women to show certain things. And the alt text they used was a picture of Jane, a picture of... I said, hang on a minute. What you're saying here visually is that, this one was an elderly Maori lady, another one was a Pacifica lady, and it was very clear they'd chosen to appeal to those audiences. You're losing that because all you're saying is that's Jane. So think about what the picture's saying rather than what it's showing. And again, from a dev point of view, make sure that your content people are able to do that and you make it easy for them. So yeah, I've talked about that. Texting graphics is pretty much a no-no. Reason for that is you know what happens when you expand a graphic and make it bigger. It goes all pixelated and horrible. They let you off in the standards for logos, and you can let the alt text. But what I often find is, particularly in New Zealand where we have a company name and then we have the Te Reo version, people will put company name, but they forget that actually it's the Te Reo versions there as well, so you need to put that in the alt text. So again, it's thinking about what you're trying to say here. This is always the biggest one I was saying about getting the visual stuff right. If you tab around the page, can you see where the focus is now? How much effort have we put into this?
Not painful at all.
No, it's hugely painful. But it's even more painful to try and get around the page when suddenly you get into the mega menu and you've got no idea which item's highlighted because it's not highlighted. It doesn't have to be ugly.
It's interesting though, because when it's not there, you kind of go, whatever. And then you see it in there and you go, oh, thank you. Point.
Yeah. I'll probably throw up our mega menu. So, maybe not. I'll throw them up at the end because it's quite impressive. So skip links as well are important. Remember I talked about that guy who was hyperventilating because he was having to tab through everything? Skip links let you go from the top of the page straight to the main content, and there's a neat little, I'm surprised it hasn't been used more, but PayPal Accessibility did it, the neat little widget that examines the structure of your page and creates a little menu. So not only can you go to main content, you can actually say go to heading 1, 2, 3, and it'll automatically pick it up, so it does it at load time, page load. So if your page changes, it follows it. If your page changes badly because your content people are evil, it changes, well, you're the only one. Otherwise, Scry's bad as well. Yeah. So the stuff was really bad and accessible culture was pretty good. No? Structure. What happened there? Logical structure to your page. I've seen pages where, particularly home pages, and I don't get on very well with design people or comms people who want the big banner in the middle, the hero banner. That's a pain in the neck. You want to get to the main content of the page and have a logical way around it. So if you think about a page that's got a bunch of headings and each heading's got a bunch of subheadings under it, you don't want to go all the headings and then start on all the subheadings in your tab order, because that would be really hard to work out where you were and really frustrating. And also you're breaking the logic of what you've designed the page to be visually. So if something looks like a heading and acts like a heading, then it should be marked up as a heading. Now, there's a few CMSs I've worked with that just don't give the content people enough tools to do that. So, as I say, it's a partnership. If you haven't got the tools, you're going to put in bold and pretend it's a heading. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to put in bold and pretend it's a heading.
It goes the other way too. You can get too many options.
Yes.
And you get too clever.
Yeah.
And then that's wrong as well.
It's a partnership. And I think SilverStripe hits it pretty well. There's still a couple of frustrations with, what do you call it?
Tiny MCE.
Tiny MCE.
It's its problem, it's not.
But it's Tiny MCE's problem, not SilverStripe's. SilverStripe gives us pretty good control. And my big stick. So, but make it logical, make it consistent. So from page to page, you're going to find the main heading in the same place. That all helps. Particularly if you think about someone who's got short-term memory issues. If they start going to a familiar place and you've got, all your secondary headings are over on the right on all the pages, not swapped occasionally and in random places, that all helps. And making your headings clear so that you remember when you, as a site builder, you get a web page and you skim over, you look for the heading, and you go, that's the bit I want to read. Well, screen reader users can do exactly the same thing. They can skip from heading to heading. So again, making your headings clear when you can't see the context is really important. This has just decided, your mouse has decided it doesn't want to work, mate.
Use the keyboard.
So remember I talked about magnification? That's the old stuff website at 2 times magnification, and most people who use a magnifier start off at 2 times, mainly because they can never be bothered to read the instructions to make it magnify anymore. That's what it comes out of the box at. People I used to work with at Blind Foundation were heading up to 7 times. That's your full screen. So if that's your full screen, where do you think you want to put the important stuff? Down that left-hand edge, so you've got something to... because if you put it in the middle, and you've got a bit of a wobbly arm as you move that around, you start losing your position. Thinking about one of the things I find quite difficult to work with at the moment, and I'm still looking for a good solution. Often when you get an invoice where there's a table in it, you'll find the item is way over to the left's justified, and the price or the quantity, whatever, is way over to the right justified. And if you've got to sort of waggle your way across and there's no joining lines or anything, and this is a tech thing because it's usually the content guys can't do anything about it, it's auto-generated. If you've got how do you tie up that it's bananas that are $10? Because by the time you get over to the other side, you might be down there and you just don't realise. So you can think about things like designing a table like that with alternate bands of colour, just enough to give you a guiding line, but better still is to keep things together. Again, design issue, content issue, dev issue, everybody's issue. Yeah. How am I doing for time, sir? Yeah. For the designs, there's a link in it. I'll let. This is a brilliant infographic, and what I love about these guys is not only have they done a brilliant infographic for sighted people, they've done accessible versions too, so everyone can join in this. I'll send that round with Mike can take the links, but that's a really useful thing to have to hand. So that's their designer's resource. Yeah. Online forms we talked about a little, but think about literacy in plain language. Again, it's sort of a design content issue, but whether it's accessible comes right down to the dev. So is your labelling? Often with checkboxes, they are really awkward. Again, quite a few CMSs I've found where the label ends up associated with the checkbox after. So if you've got checkbox 1, 2, 3, 4, as you go through it with the screen reader, you hear the checkbox for number 1 is associated with number 2, checkbox for number 2 is associated with 3. You're never going to get a sensible answer out of that. Label 4 seems to work quite well, I'm not sure. And having unique IDs for your controls, so some CMSs seem to spew out over and over the same ID for controls, and that confuses things, because the label for control 1 is actually over 10 different controls. Good feedback. People always forget what happens when it goes wrong, when someone doesn't fill in the form properly. So Scribe will swear at me, but I've spent ages giving him grief about when you throw up an error message, make sure it focuses on it, not just visually, but also puts the keyboard focus on it, so that if someone's tabbing through with the keyboard, they're already at the error. They know that form hasn't gone anywhere. If they're using magnification, you draw it on. If you bring it visual, they'll see that something's gone wrong. If you don't move the focus visually to someone who's only got 1/7 of the screen, they've got no idea that it's either, well, they've probably got no idea it's gone. They've certainly got no idea that something went wrong unless they go scrolling around to look for it. And why do we want to make it hard for people? Think about what info is vital. That's a design, well, it's a usability issue. If you don't really need to know someone's inside leg, probably don't ask it. Especially think about what's compulsory, what's a mandatory field. So most flexible, if you can complete and submit a form online, then just about anyone can do it as long as it's properly marked up. But some people still insist on getting a physical signature, which always used to make my boss laugh because he didn't have one, because he couldn't see to make one. But at least if he could complete a form online and print it out, he didn't have to try and write on a blank form. And avoid capture. I know I'll be unpopular by saying there are alternatives, but there are. The problem with capture is it only uses one sense, and you might say, well, we'll go to the audio capture. I sat with a blind colleague a while back, and we had 10 attempts, both of us. I could see what the thing was. She could hear it. 10 attempts it took us before we gave up. So even the audio capture isn't good, and there are quite a few people out there, it's a subsector I know, who are deaf-blind, so they have some hearing impairment and the blindness, and you're just stuffed with that. So try and think of something like, at the moment we're using a honeypot, not giving away any secrets here, to capture bots, but do use that in combination with things like, if the form gets filled in within 1 second, it's probably not a real person. You can make a good guess that's probably worth throwing away. That sort of thing. So rather than just going straight to capture. So everyone knows what capture is? My favourite acronym is FILTH. So when you're creating documents, think about FILTH. Fonts, images, links, tables and headings, they're the key things. And when you create your document, if you mark those up properly I'm guessing you're going to be using Word. Wouldn't it be great if everyone was using something open, but when you save it as a PDF, that will also get transferred over, or when you put it into HTML, not only will it screw up your beautiful HTML, but at least it'll be marked up when you get it. Sadly, it seems to have taken, there used to be a nice poster you could get to put up and give to your content people. Looks like the Blind Foundation have taken it down, but if I can find a copy, again, I'll give it to Mike. But it just goes through those and explains a little bit about choosing fonts, a little bit about how to mark up images. So yeah, a lot of people don't even know how to put alt text in because they never even thought about it, so it's actually really easy. Word 2010 onwards has got an accessibility checker, so once you finish your document, just in the same way you do a spell check, do an access check. It's a great little tool. It even tells you, it says, you've got this problem, this is why it's important, this is how you fix it. Not going to be the answer to everything, but it's worth doing in the same way you'd spell check. And simple PDFs, straight out of Word, retain all the accessibility. If they're marked up properly in the first place, using styles, then when you save them as PDF, they come through pretty accessible, although I would say, please don't use PDFs. We've been pushing, I'm not advocating for them, I'm just realistic that people use them. And if you're going to use them, at least give a go to make them marked up. I think that's me. Unless anyone wants to